Hey, what's up? It's Matt, and the other day I was doing research for a video on Wikipedia and I happened to come across this article, List of Inventors Killed by Their Own Inventions. And it was interesting and hilarious, but also heroic and sad, so I wanted to make a short video talking about the 5 that stood out to me. First off, Alexander Bogdanov. Born in 1873 in the Russian Empire, Bogdanov is an interesting dude. Not only did he co-found Russia's Bolshevik Party with future leader Vladimir Lenin, but he was also a real polymath. He dabbled in economics, medicine, politics, philosophy, and writing, and he's estimated to have published almost 200 pieces of work, including 2 of science fiction. Now, Bogdanov was really interested in blood transfusions. While the West was using blood transfusions to keep sick patients alive, Bogdanov thought that blood transfusions could physically stimulate, increase the well-being of already healthy people. And after 11 blood transfusions of his own, he even experienced improved eyesight and reduced balding, among other positive symptoms. However, on Bogdanov's 12th blood transfusion, he swapped blood with someone who had tuberculosis and malaria, and he died soon after. Interestingly, modern experts hypothesize that the tuberculosis and malaria in the blood alone did not kill him. They believe that because of the previous many transfusions he had done, his body developed antibodies that would have reacted negatively to any blood he received, no matter whether it had disease or not. Either way, Bogdanov died administering his own application of blood transfusions to himself, so that's person number 1. These next 2 perished from trying to make their own flying machines and failing, so Number 2, Ismail ibn Hammad al-Jawhari. Born in modern-day Kazakhstan a little before the first millennium, Arabic scholar Ismail ibn Hammad al-Jawhari was most notable for creating a massive Arabic dictionary with around 40,000 entries. It became one of the main Arabic dictionaries of the medieval times, and you can explore a fully searchable online version of it here, though it is fully in Arabic. Anyway, his second most notable moment was when he thought he could make a flying machine out of 2 wooden wings and some rope, and then jumped off the top of a mosque and fell right to his death. I wish I could tell you more about this person, but everything I've said to you right now is literally all the modern world knows about this man through records kept. The second flying fail goes to French tailor Franz Reichelt. Reichelt was born in the Austrian Empire in 1879, and we do have a lot more information about him. Unlike al-Jawhari, Reichelt is unfortunately most notable for his fatal attempt to fly using something he created. Around the 1900s, there was a growing interest in aviation, which also meant there was a growing interest in aviation safety. Several parachutes had successfully been tested before, but they were all fixed canopy parachutes, meaning the parachutes were open before the jump actually took place. But this obviously wouldn't work for airplane pilots. They needed all the space they could get in their tiny airplanes, and if they needed to jump out, then they would have to have the parachute open. And so in 1910, Reichelt dedicated all his attention and effort to developing a parachute that would open after a jump. Interestingly, the first prototypes he made actually worked. The dummies he would affix the parachutes to fell safely from 5 stories up in the air. But when Reichelt tried turning that successful prototype into a physically wearable suit for aviators, every single test thereafter failed. He attributed the failure of these wearable suit designs to not having a great enough height to test the drop, so he began petitioning authorities to use the Eiffel Tower to test the drop. After a year of petitioning, he was finally allowed to do it and announced that he would in 1912. But he had told the authorities in this petition he would be test dropping a dummy, not himself. In fact, after Reichelt's death, the police issued a statement saying that if they knew he was going to jump himself, they would not have allowed it under any circumstance. Reichelt didn't even tell his friends until the day of, and as soon as they heard it, they and countless others tried in vain to convince him not to jump until literally the final moment. Anyway, he finally gets to the top, jumps, and you know what happens after that. The parachute didn't open and he falls to his death. There is actually a video of him jumping off the tower and hitting the ground, which you can watch in full on YouTube. You know, with al-Jawhari's death, it seems stupid, but maybe he took some safety precautions that we don't know about because there's so little information on the guy, right? But with Reichelt, none of his full-fledged designs ever worked once, and yet he still had such confidence in it that he didn't want to use a safety measure like a rope or something. So I guess the nice way to say this would be, I applaud his faith in his invention despite any evidence that it would work and any backup plan if it didn't. Number 4, Thomas Andrews. This one is more of a sad and heroic tale, as Thomas Andrews was one of the lead architects who designed the Titanic. Born in 1873 in Ireland, Thomas Andrews entered a pretty well-off and connected family. Two of his siblings eventually became the Prime Minister and Lord Chief Justice of Ireland. His uncle was also the co-owner of the shipbuilding company Harland & Wolff, and he got Thomas an apprenticeship there when he was only 16. Harland & Wolff began constructing the Titanic in 1909, and it was designed by the general manager of Harland & Wolff, Thomas Andrews' uncle, and Andrews himself. Now, something interesting is that Thomas Andrews supposedly asked for there to be 46 lifeboats on the Titanic instead of the 20 that they went with, and for certain portions of the Titanic to actually be double-hulled instead of the single that it went with. This very possibly means that more than twice the amount of people would have survived the sinking of the Titanic, and also that maybe the Titanic wouldn't even have sunk to begin with. But I say that Andrews supposedly asked for these things because the only source I could find for this was TitanicUniverse.com, and no offense to you, TitanicUniverse.com, but I can't really tell how reliable you are. But despite this supposed suggestion and overruling, Andrews did remark on the day before the Titanic sank that it was, quote, nearly perfect as human brains can make her. So Andrews went on the Titanic's maiden voyage, and if you've seen the movie, you know that the Titanic sinks. The Titanic hit the iceberg on the morning of April 15th, and after assessing the damage, Andrews said that it was a, quote, mathematical certainty that it would sink, estimating there would be about an hour before the ship totally sank. Andrews spent this final hour urging passengers to get in the Titanic's lifeboats and get out of there. The legend goes that as the ship sank, he stayed in the first-class smoking room alone, life jacket off, just staring at a picture of a location where the Titanic was supposed to visit on its return voyage. Now that is epic and makes for a great movie scene, but multiple accounts have disputed that. According to others, it's more likely that Andrews spent his final moments on the deck of the Titanic, still urging people to get in the lifeboats and throwing deck chairs out in the ocean for people to use as flotation devices. Andrews was last seen leaving the ship, and his body was never recovered. Despite this ending not being as epic, Andrews was still an amazing man. A telegraph sent to his father a little bit after the ship sank read, "Interview Titanic's officers, all unanimous that Andrews heroic unto death, thinking only safety others. Extend heartfelt sympathy to all." Later, a stewardess on the ship wrote that Mr. Andrews met his fate like a true hero, realizing the great danger and gave up his life to save the women and children of the Titanic. They will find it hard to replace him. And finally, number 5, Marie Curie. Born in Warsaw, Poland in 1867, Marie Curie was super impressive and amazing. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, the first person to ever win 2 Nobel Prizes, and to this day, only 3 other people after her have ever won 2 Nobel Prizes. She also achieved that and so much more despite a lot of hardships that she experienced while growing up. Her family lost all their wealth and land at a young age because they were fighting for Polish independence from Russia. Her mom and sister also both died before Marie Curie was even a teenager, and she faced a ton of sexism, like not being able to study at certain places she wanted to, not being able to teach at certain places she wanted to, not being able to give a talk about the material for which she won her first Nobel Prize, and not even being included in her first Nobel Prize because she was a woman. Her husband had to convince the committee that yes, she did the most important work here, she belongs on this prize. All of Marie Curie's accomplishments on her own are incredible, but they stand out even more when you realize all the stuff she went through to actually achieve them. And I could easily have made a whole video just about her, but sticking to the theme, we gotta keep going. Despite some universities not accepting her, Marie Curie did enroll in the University of Paris in 1891, and soon thereafter she met her husband, Pierre Curie, whom she married in 1895. Also in 1895, X-rays were discovered, and a year after that, it was discovered that uranium salts emitted rays similar to X-rays. These 2 findings inspired Marie Curie to study uranium and the rays they emitted, and in 1898, she published a paper with her husband that documented the existence of the newly discovered element polonium, which she named after her native country, Poland. By the end of the year, they also announced the discovery of the element radium, which is the Latin word for ray. And during all this research, Marie Curie and her husband were the ones who coined the term radioactivity. In the 4-ish years between 1898 and 1902, Marie Curie and her husband published a combined total of 32 scientific papers about this stuff, one of which said that tumorous cells, when exposed to radium, were destroyed faster than normal cells, which is the basis for one modern method of cancer treatment today. In 1903, Marie Curie, along with physicist Henri Becquerel and her husband Pierre Curie, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their work with radiation. And in 1911, Marie Curie alone won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for, quote, the discovery of the elements radium and polonium by the isolation of radium and the study of the nature and compounds of this remarkable element. She still continued her research and doing a ton of other impressive things throughout her life, but she passed away in 1934 at the age of 66 due to aplastic anemia, a bone marrow disease almost certainly caused by her exposure to radioactive materials throughout her life. The damaging effects of radiation weren't known too well back then, and her decades of exposure to it caused other chronic illnesses, like near blindness, as well before her death. In fact, something crazy is that her original papers from the 1980s are considered too radioactive to physically handle. They're kept in boxes lined with lead, and you have to wear protective clothing to physically interact with them. There are so many other fantastic aspects of her life too, like that a standard unit for radioactivity was named after her, as well as one of the periodic elements. Cornell professor L. Pierce Williams has said that, quote, "The result of Curie's work was epoch-making. Radium's radioactivity was so great that it could not be ignored. It seemed to contradict the principle of the conservation of energy and therefore forced a reconsideration of the foundations of physics." There's also one paragraph from her Wikipedia page which just really sums up how amazing she was, and I want to read it to you. She was known for her honesty and moderate lifestyle. Having received a small scholarship in 1893, she returned it in 1897 as soon as she began earning her keep. She gave much of her first Nobel Prize money to friends, family, students, and research associates. In an unusual decision, Curie intentionally refrained from patenting the radium isolation process so that the scientific community could do research unhindered. She insisted that monetary gifts and awards be given to the scientific institutions she was affiliated with rather than to her. She and her husband often refused awards and medals. Albert Einstein reportedly remarked that she was probably the only person who could not be corrupted by fame. Despite a life marked by hardships and sexism, Marie Curie still emerged as one of the most influential scientific figures, male or female, of all time. And that's it! Those are my 5 people killed by their own inventions. Alexander Bogdanov, administering his own application of the blood transfusion, Ismail ibn Hammad al-Jawhari, and Franz Reichelt, killed by flying machines they invented, Thomas Andrews, the architect of the ship that sank, and Marie Curie, who isolated radioactive elements which eventually poisoned her. Hope you enjoyed this video, thanks, and I'll see you later. Hey, hope you enjoyed the video. As you may have noticed, I've been gone from YouTube for a bit, but this is me coming back. If you want to watch a short video on why I was gone and what I was up to, you can click a video up here on my second channel, Everything Else, and check that out. Thanks, and I'll see you later.